96.3 WHUR and HUR Voices, Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. Your questions or comments toll free at 855-288-4876. Now, Insight.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. It's a common phrase for professionals of every age and background: work-life balance. What isn't so common is how to get there, how to achieve it, how to leave home at home and work at work, and not let either interfere with the other. Well, my guests have a lot to say about that and some tips on how you can achieve an emotional work-life balance. Ramon Richards is a vice president at Fannie Mae. Deborah Owens is a career coach and founder of Corporate Alley Cat. And Dr. Nicole Cutts is a clinical psychologist and success coach. Lines are open if you have a question or comment about achieving an emotional work-life balance. And if you're struggling with it, certainly give us a call, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Follow me on Twitter at Daily Drum WHUR or at H. Fisher WHUR. Thank you all for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
Great to be here, Harold.
Okay, so let me start with Deborah. Deborah, how can a work-life balance that isn't balanced get you in trouble or be problematic for you at work?
So, can you repeat the question?
How can it get you in trouble at work if your work-life balance isn't balanced? Mm-hmm. If you allow problems at home to follow you at work,
right?
For example.
So, following up on if you have problems at home that follow you to work, I think that that's normal, right? We're not robots. If you're going through a divorce, if you have a child that's sick, I don't think you turn that off when you go to work. So I don't know if I think the answer is how do we separate that, or how do you not bring those problems to work? I think the question is how do you manage it in the workplace?
Mm-hmm. Well, but can it be problematic if you don't?
Absolutely, it can be problematic. Not only can it be problematic to your performance, to your interactions, to your physical and your mental well-being. And also it can potentially eliminate opportunities down the road, because if I can, particularly for people of color, you have a brand out there. And if there's something going on at work and nobody knows what's going on and it's causing your performance to slip, or you're seeing your attitude or your level of engagement change, people may not ask those next questions. They may begin to make assumptions saying this person is not ready for X, Y, and Z, or maybe we can't pursue this opportunity with that person. But again, I think we're not robots. We're all humans. We all have issues that start at home. I think it's very difficult to separate it, but I think you can better manage how you deal with those problems, your personal issues in the workplace.
Ramon, doesn't it also depend on how severe those issues at home are and how they may impact the job?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you always want to start from a place of what are the things that I personally can do to ensure I don't bring these challenges to work. I think it's also important for more severe situations to understand what services does your employer provide that could be helpful navigating through some of your personal challenges. I know at Fannie Mae, through our employee assistance program, we have services like face-to-face counseling, elder care support, on-site emergency child care, new parent support, the type of support that can help you through challenging situations.
It's interesting that you mentioned a couple of things when you're talking about, for example, counseling. If you're having a personal issue, and then you may have an issue regarding child care. I mean, depending on the severity of the kind of counseling that you need, those issues are really far apart, but they're all very, very important, and I can understand how they can affect your performance on the job.
Yeah, absolutely right. Employers have recognized that there needs to be more focus on the well-being of each of their employees, and so you're seeing more and more employees invest in these type of programs that help people balance between some of the challenges that they're working through, and helping them come up with different solutions, even when they bring those problems to work.
Mm-hmm. But now, Dr. Cutts, but here's the flip side of that.
Mm-hmm.
If you have someone who is so consumed in their job that it begins to impact their home life, whether it's the relationship, with your spouse, a relationship or mate, or a relationship with your children.
Yes.
And with the 24-hour cycle of work, where you get up and you leave and you go early, you come home late, and you're bringing home work, how do you separate that from your home life?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to try to set some boundaries. I know that many workers are pushed to do more and more with less, and so we get into this 24-hour thing. But I think that we all have to really try to set some boundaries so we're not always bringing work home. Sometimes you have to, but, try not to bring that home, first of all. And second of all, I think we really, like Deborah was talking about, how to manage stress. I think that we have to become better at managing stress both at home and at work, so that when you are in a particular situation, like I start from a place of emotional intelligence. So it's like the self-awareness piece. What's going on with me? How am I feeling? And then the self-management piece. How do I manage myself and my relationships with other people so that I'm having the best possible relationships? And if those relationships are out of whack or out of balance at home or at work, then you need to back off, and try to get things more in balance. And maybe that starts, again, with setting some boundaries.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about emotional work-life balance. What happens when you don't have that balance, and how do you achieve it? Where do you begin? Deborah, do you have to put your game face on at work?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, because I wanted to jump in and say that, to Ramon's point, most organizations have lots of resources that are available to you, and that you can ask for help. A lot of the questions I get is people say, well, I don't want my manager to know. Well, if you go to the HR, some of those resources, they are confidential. Your manager will not know what's going on. Many of the organizations, I'm sure Fannie Mae, they have third-party organizations. So whether it's a health issue, it's a mental wellness issue, that is not information that is shared with your employer. So I think I want people to know that you can go to these resources, and it is confidential. Your manager will not be involved in that. And I also want to say, I think sometimes people feel stressed because they feel like they need to overshare what's going on in their personal life. There's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I need to take a couple of days off because I have to address some personal issues, period. You don't have to say, I've got a divorce going on, or I have severe child care issues. That's up to you. But oftentimes people feel like they have to give the whole backstory. Mm-hmm. And you don't. And I think that's part of the boundaries as well. You don't have to share everything, and most organizations are set up so that confidentiality piece is intact.
So, Deborah, I just want to build on the point. I think boundaries is really important here. And I think it's about, how do you transition from work to home, home to work? And, for me, what's worked is coming up with a routine. And I think a routine is different for each individual. For some people, it's exercise. It's listening to music. It's taking a walk. But it's understanding that when I'm at work, I am channeling and focusing in on this space. And when I'm at home, it's important that I'm present and I want to focus on this space. So one thing is coming up with some routine that works for you, that allows you to disconnect and then refocus on the priority at hand.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about emotional work-life balance. How do you leave home at home and work at work and not let either interfere with the other? Tony, calling from Columbia. Thanks for calling, Tony. What's on your mind?
Yes, my question is, when you're stressed out on the job by your superiors, what is the best way not to be able to bring that home? Because you need some kind of outlet, and that's usually your spouse that you talk to.
Dr. Cutts?
Well, that's a very good question, Tony. Well, the first thing I would look at is trying to change my own thoughts or my own cognitions so that I'm not feeling as stressed, because stress is the interaction between what's happening and how we think about it. So I would try to manage it myself with looking at what is it exactly that has me stressed out. Can I think about what's happening in a different way? You know, what part of that do I control? And then also, you know, if you feel like bringing it home to your spouse is causing too much stress between you all as a couple, you know, earlier we talked about getting help either on the job or from outside, from somebody outside. So looking at having either a social network that you can talk to and get support from, or seeking out help from a professional, I think can be very helpful.
Okay. Tony, thank you so much. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810, achieving an emotional work-life balance. How do you keep home at home and work at work? Let's talk to Pat. Pat calling from Waldorf. Thanks for calling, Pat. What's on your mind?
Hi. Well, you know, I want to comment on, you know, leaving work at home at home. I think it's really hard, especially today, because of the technology that we have. You know, you look at your emails all the time. You have your phone with you, and a lot of companies, you can actually have your email on the face, you know, on your phone that's easily accessible. And so you're constantly checking your email, even though you're at home. You don't leave work at work because you take work home with you. And so you kind of feel obligated to respond to people who are still sending you emails, even though you're at home. And, you know, you kind of feel bad if you don't respond to them immediately, or if they have to wait, you know, to get a response from you.
You make an excellent point.
Pat, yeah. So, Pat, it's a great observation, and it's actually something that, you know, I struggle with it as well. I'll tell you personally what I do. When I go home, I try to put the devices down, focus on, you know, family time, dinner with the kids, the bedtime routine, any basics that I need to take care of with family. So really focus in on them. And at the point where, you know, those activities are complete, at that point, you know, I will go back and check some emails or catch up on the day. So to me, it's really about how do you make sure you're present in the right way with your family that's a priority, or some of your outside of work activities, and then identify when are those right times to reengage in work activity.
Thank you so much, Pat. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about the emotional work-life balance. How do you keep home at home, work at work, and what's the phrase? Never the twain shall meet. You know, how do you keep them from, you know, knocking up against each other? And here's the thing, though. Because, you know, now we've got a credibility gap here in this conversation. And this is why, because, Ramon, your title is Vice President. You don't get there without a whole lot of work, early days, late nights. Dr. Cutts, you are an entrepreneur and a clinical psychologist. Deborah, you are an entrepreneur, 28 hours a day. I'm in the news business. I wake up and I'm looking at the news. I take it home with me. I take it to work. So what do we do, Deborah?
So I just want to respond to that last question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a nice tie-in to where you're going with this. And I want to talk a little bit about expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So she said, I feel obligated to respond. That doesn't mean that you have to respond. I might revisit that and say, well, why do you feel obligated? Because oftentimes people send emails. There's not a lot you can do with a lot of the exchange that goes on in the evening. You can't fully address some things until the morning. So I think sometimes we put burdens on ourselves that don't have to be there. I think we also show people how to treat us, and we sometimes set these unrealistic expectations. Just because your boss sent you a text at 9 o'clock at night, which I think might be a little inappropriate, doesn't mean that you have to respond right away.
And then you can give them a job, because that's the pressure that they feel. We're going to talk about that on the other side. Stay with us. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about work-life balance. How do you achieve it? The ups and downs of it. Stay with us. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Jeff Brown is next with the original Quiet Storm on 96.3 WHUR. More of this conversation in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we're talking about achieving an emotional work-life balance. My guests are Ramon Richards. He is the vice president at Fannie Mae. Deborah Owens is a career coach and founder of Corporate Alley Cat. And Dr. Nicole Cutt, she's a clinical psychologist and success coach. Lines are open at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. If you're on the phone, please don't hang up. We will be getting to you. You will be able to hear the program. If you're having difficulty getting through, please keep trying. I promise we will be getting to you. So before the break, I was telling Deborah that she's going to hire you when your boss sends you that email at night and your boss says, why didn't you respond to my email at 11 a.m. At night after scandal went off?
Exactly. So again, I think it comes back to expectations and having the appropriate communications and understanding the organization where you work. Now, if you're at an organization and you know there's something critical going on, you're in the middle of a launch or there's a big IT project, you know that you may need to be available. But if it's just a regular thing going on and your boss just has a habit of texting you at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night because that's when he or she likes to do their work, that doesn't mean that that's when you have to do your work.
But how do you manage that?
You have a conversation, Harold. You say if you were my boss, to say, hey, Harold, I noticed that it seems like you like to jump on that email at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I want to let you know I am usually offline at that point. So I will probably be responding to you in the morning. Is that an issue? If it is, let's figure out a way to make that work because I want to make sure that I'm responsive and that you're getting the information that you need. Oftentimes people will say, oh, I'm just, that's when my kids go to bed, so that's when I tend to get busy. But, don't worry about responding to that until the morning. That's just my schedule. But oftentimes we don't have those conversations. We make those assumptions. And maybe you are in a role where you are required to do that. Then you need to understand that and you need to be available. But that is not every role.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Lauren, calling from Silver Spring. Thanks for hanging on, Lauren. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to touch on what she said in regards to some jobs, because it's not where I work at. I work at the post office, and I had an incident where my daughter had run off, and she had went missing for a few days. And they had a big issue with me taking off, trying to find my daughter. They don't have that understanding. They're more concerned with, you have to be here. You have to be here. If you miss a day, it's a problem. If you have mental issues, they don't care about that either. And they make it like, if you're not following their protocol and on their time, that they're going to make it a bigger issue than what it needs to be. And working at the post office, I put a lot of time in and effort into working my job.
Yeah. Well, hold on, Lauren. Let me see if we can address that. Ramon, I want you to address culture, because I think that while what Deborah says, on paper, I think that's a very valid argument, and that is perfect if you have an understanding boss. I do. We work in a wonderful, culture here where family first. That's what we hear. But as Lauren is saying, that's not always the case.
Right. So that is a particularly tough situation. I will say employers as a whole, and one statistic out there is that 68% of employers offer stress management programs for their employees. That there is a lot of focus on how do we maximize the well-being of our employee, because we know that drives better work productivity. In this situation, for Lauren, I think maybe doing some of the research and actually educating your employers around the importance of this type of support from the employer and the benefits to the organization could be helpful. Maybe it's a space where, that hasn't been an area of focus, but you could be the person that initiates a new discussion, a new way to think about work-life balance and supporting the staff.
Dr. Cutt, how should she manage that?
How should Lauren manage that? Well, I agree that everything that Ramon said makes a lot of sense. And I think that we also need to teach our bosses how to treat us. and from the beginning maybe having some conversations to set those boundaries about what is the expectation, and showing your boss that you're willing to meet their expectations, 99% of the time, and sometimes you're going to need something. I would also, I don't know what what her HR department would say, but I would also suggest that she do some research around what obligations do her employers have to her in terms of giving her time off, like you have family medical leave, things like that, and to do some research to see, what also, legal ground she has to stand on.
Okay. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing with us, and continued good luck on your job and your career. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Walmond calling from Howard County. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mr. Fisher and your panel. First of all, good evening, everybody. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
I have a quick question. I guess it's not a question. I was just telling a young lady. I said, it blows my mind because, I'm a doctor. Made it up finally by the grace of God to get into a position where I could do my thing. Matter of fact, I'm an alumnus from HU. So I was telling her, I said, I got to this point. I had the guy called in last night to go to work. Came back home this morning. My kids was up. I have 2 twin kids and a daughter. 2 twin daughters and a son. And they just was going off. And I'm like, well, why y'all going off? They were like, well, you went to work. I said, well, got to go to work. That's why you have a nice house, nice cars. And you know what they hit me with, y'all?
What's
they
that?
Said, here's the kicker. If you're not here to be a father and always at work, we're bothered by that. They were like, you're totally missing everything that we came up for. So I caught what your panel was saying about the family. But what's bothering me is that if I don't grind now, then you're going to have to grind later. Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. I'm going into a street mode with you with this now. Because it's like being... And so maybe I could get some help with this. I don't know. Maybe I might have to hire you. Maybe I might have to hire some of your panel. I might have to hire some of your panel. I'm saying shoot them an email and some checks in the mail. I'm like, look here, because it's actually starting to upset me. Because I'm thinking like, okay, I came out of Howard, went into the military as an officer, came in, had got my doctorate, and I started grinding and doing my thing, and y'all are still not satisfied.
How old are your kids, woman?
Boy in Southeast D.C., y'all would be happy, but now I got MD behind my name, and it's still a problem.
How old are your kids?
My oldest twins are 21, and my son is 19. So exactly.
Well, they're not kids.
Exactly, they're older.
Yeah.
They're getting ready to go to college, and it's like it's bothering me. I'm like, okay, I'm not ready to tell y'all get out because
Lord.
y'all got to get on your own. The same way I had to get and grind and come through Howard U and get that and do my thing and then go to the military. Guess what? Y'all have to do it too. So it's kind of
well. Hold on. Let me try Dr. Cutts first, and then and Deborah, and we'll just kind of take it all the way around. And I think, Dr. Cutts, that's the thing that I spoke about early in this conversation. It's not just about having difficulties at home impacting work, but you could have the job making home life difficult.
Yeah. Well, I have the same recommendation in terms of setting some boundaries and also talking about expectations and what's realistic. It sounds like our caller's kids are sort of acting like his boss or bosses. I think he needs to sit down and have a meeting with them, maybe get out some flip chart paper and look at the hours in the day, the money that he needs to make, and talk to them about what it is that they expect and what he expects from them and what's realistic. Because I think, kids, we're taught to be self-centered, and sometimes it takes us a bit of time to grow out of that. And so I think that as long as when he's there with them, he's really there with them, that makes a big difference. But I also think that he needs to talk to them about expectations and what's realistic as well.
Deborah?
So I would just say in that situation, I think that's a very personal situation, right? He has to identify what his priorities are. Is it to grind now and to understand that he may not always be there when the children want him there? If it's really bothering him and it's creating a lot of stress and tension, there are other options, right? In this particular role, it sounds like he has to be available and he has certain responsibilities, and that's not going to change. if he does want that to change because of family issues, then what we would encourage people to do is kind of explore what other opportunities might be available.
Such as?
Well, I don't know. He's an MD. Can he do an emergency room? Can he do a private practice? Can he go to a practice? Is he at a hospital? Can he work in a corporate environment? But again, understanding what are the things that he needs for his life to operate in a way that makes him feel whole and healthy, and it does not cause stress to his family. So again, our thing is, let's explore the options, because too many times people look at things and say, this is how it is, without getting all of the information and finding out what other options are available. But the first step is to understand what's most important to him, that he wants to stay where he is and do the grinding because he knows that he has a long-term vision. And of course, the kids aren't understanding that right now, which makes sense. Or if it's causing a situation that is not harmonious at the home, then maybe if it's too much of an issue, he may want to see what are some other options out there. People do that frequently when it doesn't fit lifestyle.
But Ramon, you have young children.
I do.
But in Wallman's case, his quote-unquote kids are adults. And I'm just speaking from my thought process. If your kids are now adults, as he said, they are either in college, ready to go to college, maybe they should understand that that this is what Dad has done, and he has provided them with all of these things, including a BMW. I'm not talking about a car. I'm talking about the black man working.
Well, I will tell you, I think this one is straightforward. Because his kids are adults, I think it's sitting down with them and being really clear in terms of, here's what my job requires. Here's the time that's going to be allocated for us to spend quality time. But they have to understand. These are the things that, here's when I have to focus on my job. And when I'm with you all in the defined times that are family time, I will be fully present. But, they're going to have to respect the boundaries of his work as well. I think it's very different if you're talking about young kids that require a lot more attention. But when you're talking about 19 and 21-year-olds, I think you could sit down and have a grown-up conversation about this.
Well, Wallman, thank you so much for sharing with us. Interesting dilemma, and continue to do what you do, not only to provide the services you do in the community, but also to help keep your family together. So certainly, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Let me go to another point, and I'll start with Dr. Cutts about this. What about the other side of this? How should family members address or view issues that come from work into the home, whether it's a spouse or perhaps even, who knows, even an adult child that may be still living with you? How should the family look at that?
I think that communication is the key. We've been talking about boundaries, expectations, having conversations about expectations, what's working, what's not working. And I also, I agree with Deborah also that what are your priorities? And everybody talking about what is most important to them, and understanding that balancing, work-life balance, all balancing does not mean that it's static. It means that it wavers to this side, it wavers to that side a little bit. And so everybody has to have a big, healthy dose of understanding and willingness to compromise, but families need to be willing and able to talk about these things, not just harbor the resentments or, feel angry or neglected, but to actually talk about this, and for all of the members of the family to be able to ask for what it is they want and need, with the understanding that you're not always going to get everything that you ask for, and that's where the compromise and the patience has to come in.
Well said. I need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to go back into the workplace and talk about how you should or should not interact with your coworkers when you are having difficult times at home. Lines are still open, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about emotional work-life balance, keeping home at home and work at work. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue the conversation about achieving an emotional work balance. Trying to keep work at work and home at home. Deborah Owens is cutting up. She is challenging, my theory. Okay, Deborah. So let's continue or recap what we were saying on the air. You said that after decades in corporate America, you said that the problem is communication and not notifying your superiors about the situations that could be impacting your performance from home.
Yeah, what I wanted to highlight is that as an employee, you have a responsibility to get clarity on what the expectations are for your role. And if you're not clear on those, to have a conversation. If there's an environment that is not working for you, meaning if someone is texting you or sending you work emails that you need to respond to at 10 and 11 o'clock at night, that's an area where you need to have a conversation to find out, is that a required part of my job? Is this just because you like to work late at night? And understanding what are the expectations. And if you're not aligned with them, finding an alternative solution if possible. The other piece that you mentioned, Harold, was culture. You have to understand the environment in which you work. If you're in an environment where, listen, it is, hardcore, we want you available 24/7, and that's just the way it is here, and you've had the necessary conversations, then you may need to find another place to work.
Well, I agree with that, and that's the point that I didn't make.
Right.
Because I said if that is the culture, and this was a conversation we were having off air, if that is the culture, you could be replaced. The other piece of that is there are people in those specific jobs. I mentioned, for example, television, that you may have to leave.
Absolutely.
But I'm talking about, but what my point is, if you don't want to leave, but life happens.
Absolutely.
And if life happens, what we have seen is that there are times when you have life happens, and when it affects your job, you may be temporarily replaced, and when you're ready to come back, that job is not there.
Harold, I don't agree with you. So I think what happens when you don't have that conversation is that you start to develop a dislike for parts of your job, and that starts to carry on and manifest itself in different ways. When you don't have the conversation, you're now encouraging the behavior because you haven't communicated. When you do have the conversation, two things come out of that. Either one, your manager, your boss says, you know what, this is actually when I catch up. I'm not expecting you to respond now. That's a good outcome. Or the nature of this business is that we have to be on all the time. And at least for you, you understand the expectation. And you can either adapt to that, or you recognize that this may not be the right opportunity for you.
And you're making an informed decision as opposed to having an assumption that I think my boss expects me to respond to this email. My boss stays at work to 8 o'clock, so I think he wants me to stay at 8 o'clock. He may stay at the office at 8 o'clock because he doesn't like going home. And it may not be anything more than that, and that expectation may not be there for you. But if I could, Harold, I want to share a really quick personal story. When I needed to have some accommodations made for me in my workplace, I needed a flexible work schedule. I needed to be in D.C., and I was based in the Philadelphia area. And so I asked, can I work remotely? And you know what they told me? No. And so I went and I looked at what our policies were, and found out that absolutely, yes, I can do that based on the policies and guidelines set by our organization. So what did that mean? I needed to involve a few more people in that conversation. I didn't stop there. I did my research, understood what the policies and the offerings were at our organization, and absolutely, I was eligible for that, and I actually was the ideal candidate. And guess what? 9 months later, I had a work schedule that worked for the organization, and it worked for me. Now, if I had gone and said, hey, can I do this? And my manager, who may not have been aware of the policy, just automatically said no, then that would have been a loss for both of us. I would have left a very thriving career, and I think the organization would have lost some great talent. We were able to work out something that's a win-win, and that's why you have to have the conversations. You have to do the research. Even for the young lady at the Postal Service, you have to understand what the policies are and understand that sometimes your managers don't always know this information.
I get it, but you're missing my point. But this is my point. I don't care about what the book said because I'm talking about culture, relationships. As you know, considering what you do, the relationships are very, very important. And so when the boss says no, and then you say, but here on the paper, it says I can. And then the boss says, well, okay, if the paper says so, okay. But but that boss still said, I didn't want you to. And the concern and the human and real culture concern is the side eye that whether it's real that you're really getting from the boss or not is at the side eye that you think that you're getting. And that's the piece that I want to talk about.
So, Harold, I think one of
the go ahead, Dr. Cutts, and then I'll let Deborah go back.
I want to help you out because I understand what you're saying. You know, when I'm working with executive coaching clients and success coaching clients, but especially executive coaching clients, and I usually ask them, what do you think the outcome will be if you have this conversation with this boss? Like, in an ideal world, we can have these conversations and there's no retaliation. In reality, there's sometimes retaliation, or people say one thing and they act differently. And then this is where I agree with Deborah also, though, is that you still have to make a choice. So if this is the environment, if this is the culture that you're working in, and you're really not being given the freedom, you have to sometimes make the tough choice to either stay and decide why you're staying. I am staying because I'm not ready to look for a new job. I am staying because this job pays really well. And you decide and you own that. Or you decide to remove yourself from that environment. But it's not always as easy as we're saying. This is sort of in a perfect world. But either way, you still have choices, and you still have to own those choices that you make.
And that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that what you're saying, Deborah, is incorrect.
Right.
But what I'm saying is the black and white. There are many shades of gray between that and those relationships and how you relate, to your boss, because the same situation that you presented may have gone, Sally next door to you may have had the same question, and that boss may have said, yes, you can work from home, Sally.
As a matter of fact, that did happen. So
See?
Remember what I said. I said it took 9 months. So This was not an easy endeavor. It wasn't as easy as me saying, see, this is what the policy. Part of that is you have to come back and you have to reframe that conversation, right? And you also have to have a clear understanding of what you bring to the table and how your value allows that organization to achieve its goals. Because at the end of the day, what every manager or boss wants, and Ramon, feel free to jump in, they want somebody who's going to help us achieve our organizational objectives. And that's where your performance, your brand comes into play. Be the type of person where they want you to stay. Yeah. So they will make the accommodations, because I think that's a big piece of people who are able to get the things that they need in an organization and those who don't.
I think that's right.
Just hold on. Sure. I want to grab Wanda. She's been on hold. Wanda calling from Fort Washington. Go right ahead, Wanda.
Hi. I was calling because I was just wondering, how do you approach a manager on your job about what's going on? I had a domestic dispute like about 3 years ago at a job, and it spilled over into the job, and unfortunately I lost my job because of it. So when I had a meeting with the director, he told me, he's like, well, how come you didn't come to me and tell me what was going on? Now, mind you, he was a new director, and I didn't know him that well, and I had already gone to EAP, which was the Employee Assistance Program. So I didn't know really how to approach him with that problem. So I'm just saying, like, in the future, how do I let the managers know what's going on without, going into my business, deep into my business?
That is such a perfect question, Ramon. I'll let you try to tackle that.
Sure.
Because, you couldn't put it any better. I don't want these folks in my business, but I got to let these folks in my business.
And it does come down to a judgment call, and every situation is unique. I think once you know that a personal situation is going to have some effect on your work, whether it's you need more time off, there are issues that you are bringing to work that may be visible in meetings or so forth. I do think it's important to communicate enough information to your manager so they can understand what you're dealing with, and also communicate the type of support you need from that individual. Again, when you don't communicate anything, and you can do this without divulging all of your personal information, your manager won't know. They probably won't be probing to understand, and they're going to react based on your performance.
Deborah?
So I would say if in this situation you don't feel comfortable going to your manager, if you have an HR department, you can go to HR confidentially and say, I do not want this information shared with my manager, but I'd like to figure out a way that I can address this and still hold on to my job here. If you have to discuss it with your manager, I agree wholeheartedly with Ramon. You have to give them some information. And the gist of the matter is, if it's a really severe situation, they probably notice something they know something's off, right?
Which is what she was saying.
Absolutely.
It was a severe situation.
So you may go and say, listen, I'm going to need some time. I have some personal issues that I need to address. Here's the support that I need from the organization at the time. And depending on your culture, you can say, and here's how I'm going to make sure that there's a minimal disruption here.
Dr. Cutts, 30 seconds. Your final thought about that.
I don't have anything to add. I think Deborah and Ramon gave very comprehensive answers.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, I think that's a good way to end this program. Wanda, thank you so much. I appreciate your phone call, and I also want to thank Ramon Richards, Deborah Owens, and Dr. Nicole Cutts. And always, as always, information about my guests will be posted on WHUR.com if you perhaps want to reach out with them. Who knows, Wallman may be calling everybody here. So again, thank you so much. We appreciate it. That is the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141 for this Wednesday, May 31st. I'm Harold Fisher. You can follow me on Twitter at Daily Drum WHUR or H Fisher WHUR. Now, stay tuned for The Connection with Lorna Newton. Good night.
The Howard University Radio Network is WHUR 96.3 FM, WHUR World 96.3 HD2, student-run WHBC HD3, GlassHouseRadio.com, SiriusXM Channel 142, HBCU, and SiriusXM Channel 141.